All right, we're live. So, in about 5 minutes, I'm going to start reading poems. I'm Brionne Janae, um, and this is my pretty book. In about 5 minutes, I'm going to start reading poems from this book and poems that are new. I'm excited to be reading for everyone. Yay! Let's see. Hi, Erin. I'm going to be reading one of the poems I wrote at down at the residency space. I'm so excited for that. At Sundress Academy for the Arts. I had a wonderful time there. I still think about all the sheep and Munchmo the goat. I should have wrote poems. I should have written some poems about them. If only. If only. If only. Let's see. You know, I totally forgot today was the Super Bowl, but I am very glad to be doing poems instead of the Super Bowl because I was never going to watch anyway. I'm going to think of this as our little counter protest for the Super Bowl. Not even counter protest, counter Super Bowl reading. Let's see. So we got 3 minutes. And let's see, what are we up to? We're in this little office space. Got the plants over here, still alive. The Super Bowl is for commercials, but like, do we need to actually watch the Super Bowl for those commercials? I probably will go watch some of them after the fact. But I'm gonna pass on all the men running around. Even though I did used to like watching football back in the day when my brothers were playing. But after that, who cares? But anyways, we're in this pretty little office space. The plants are still living. I'm gonna read poems in 3 minutes. There will probably be some plants in the poems. Oh Lord, my mother's on. Hi, Mama. Yeah, it's very strange just like chatting alone for the next 2 minutes. But at 7, we're gonna start reading poems. It's gonna be fun. Fun, fun, fun. But yes, we shall see. I like planned out a sort of reading path for us. Hi, Mom. We'll see how the reading goes. I should set a timer for myself. Okay, I'm gonna get everything ready so we have the best reading experience once I get started. I'm gonna read for about 15 minutes. I know where I'm gonna start and I know where I'm gonna end, but I have no idea what poems we're gonna read between now and then. Let's see. Oh yeah, stopwatch. Oh, and I will be reading as Rudolph. And you might say, but Brionne, we're now in February. It is Black History Month. You are right, it is Black History Month. But still, I'm gonna be reading in some Christmas PJs because I can, and they're cozy, and it's fun. Ooh, it's 6:59. 1 more minute until I read this poem. Yeah, I'll wait. And I guess I'll do a formal, how formally can I introduce myself? But I'll give myself a little introduction. All right, it's almost time. I wish we had some background music to wait for the time with, a little do, 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 do. All right. All right, it's 7. Okay. So, hi, my name is Brionne Janae, and I am going to read some poems for everyone for about 15 minutes. And then after I read, I'm going to open it up for questions. So if you guys have questions and you start thinking about them, send them to me along the way. And once I'm done reading, I will get started. Okay? So the first poem I'm going to read is called Fish Fry. Fish fry. Sundays you whisk barefoot about the kitchen, fingertips gritty with fish fry, the cornmeal batter leaving itself powdering the hips of your corduroys, your cheeks blending with your hairline sweat. Cloaked like this, in the lazy kitchen heat, you feel most like Mama, guiding the flimsy fillets into the dancing grease, the meat of her fingers almost kissing its surface. Sometimes you even sing like Mo, your mercy lords lying over the humming oil like hoodoo, like blessing, like some old rite of passage. Truly it was that first time, when you wanted home fried fish more than you feared a blistering anointing, when you decided not to wait on Mama or Mo, but to make a home of your body, the one you carry a little more like Mama every day, your feet turned out and bare, hips sauntering like a woman made from the heat, culled from the best of the fat, spilling over into fire. Yeah, so that's Fish Fry. I love this poem. I love to start with this poem just because I feel like it's a great introduction. I love food. I feel like in some ways I become a little bit more like my mother every day. And any poem with food and her in it is always going to be fun. So this is my beautiful, beautiful book. It's called After Jubilee. And I'll read some poems from it. Yeah. Oh, and it was put out by Boat Press. And you can find it either on my website, which is my name, BrionneJanae.com, or you can go to Boat Press's website and find it as well. So I'll start with the title poem. After Jubilee. Spread the bowls to shuck their down, still sow thistle flowering and next to bear the yoke. Still the North Star tilting north, a need to cull the freed to freedom. The weary still cover their dead with groans, and you slumber, deaf to the faithful calling. Lord, hear us. Witness our yearning. Bodies grown ancient, thin as that old shanty woman, knee bones pushing through her skirt. Yet look how she leans forward, still turning at the sun, still expectant, God. We have been a long time waiting. Give up your bed. Lord, walk with us. So this book is mostly persona poems set in between the end of Reconstruction and the Civil Rights movement. So in that sort of doldrums where it was just not a great time to be Black in America. And so a lot of those poems are these poems are imaginings from different voices of that time period. So this one's called Yellow Girl. When they spit him, coal black, burning like smoke from a northern steeple, and he breathed need of my arms. When he came back broken, wanting to have me kneeling, dragging my lips over every inch of flesh to rework life piecemeal. When he found you yellow, sucking at my breast, pale as cornbread batter livid in cast iron. When you were unmarked and he looked but couldn't see his hold. When he refused to be your father. And I gave up striking flint but didn't forget the way his hand sank down my belly. When I let him whisper white man's baby, whisper how they just take and take and take. When he held me and silence was an apron stuffed in my mouth when it was stitched with my mother's shame. When I was a girl again, learning not to ask about my daddy or wonder why my hair got so gold when summer burned. When I loved you, but wanted to clean this dirty blood. When I left you in the sun and you screamed, when you lay red and peeling. When your father's courage came with corn liquor season and the rifle rang. When I begged him to run, when he ran. When he was just a small thing moving in blackness. Let's see. I'll do one more, I think, from this book. It's so strange. This book is just over a year old, and I love it dearly. And yet these poems have become so old to me because it's been so long since I wrote them. So I'll read one more, I think, from this book, and it's I'm going really fast. Maybe not. I'm gonna read this poem. It's called Heart, and it's from a sort of a longer poem at the center of the book, which is called Donor, and It's essentially an elegy to my cousin's youngest son who passed from a tragic incident. And after he passed, his parents decided to donate his organs. And I sort of wrote these poems titled after each organ he donated in order to remember him and to elegize him. I'll read Left Kidney and then I'll read Heart. Left Kidney. You, the picture of what grandma calls that well with my soul kind of faith, you fat with foreign blood and so small, passed from the body of a boy to the body of an old woman, better half of your life alighted in a breath. With such ease of acceptance, willingness to slough off oneself for the next, to assimilate into the viscera of another without pulling at the sutures or baiting the blood to conflict. How to name the difference between you who are without breath and I without naming it bitterness. It must be said. I envy you, living with no God imposed on the disorder and no sense of order or what was broken and no one to curse in prayer and nothing worth praying to. Heart. Good Friday, Mo put something in the ground. Swiss chard or green beans. A decade past, she knelt to twist the soil behind a succulent cactus, its spines overgrown and sharp as syringes. In the shadows, she nestled a peach pit. The first fruit ripened, and she split the meat between us. It was the sweetest thing. Once I culled a purple lily from the dead. Juju had just fallen, and I crooned my prayer to the single living stalk till I sprang from the dirt to hear my worry. Not one bud ever swelled to open. Juju still lies dormant on a hillside. Here, in what must be called God's periphery, his hands grasping for the baby needed action. Here, where death is fulcrum, and this boy is formed to grow that boy, purpose, beating heart, and die. How not wonder here at the choosing of the mother, her body half between the warm and the still. How hold the man silly enough to sow hope in a namesake without breaking. Sometimes there's nothing left but to bless the child, the live one with the stolen heart humming in his chest. Oh, be blessed, boy. Be blessed. So since part of that poem takes place in my grandparents' backyard, I'll read this other poem called Summer School, which also takes place in my grandparents' backyard. And incidentally, I wrote this poem this summer at the Sundress Academy for the Arts residency while I was on the farm. So thank you, Erin, and thank you, Sundress, for having me and for hosting me in this space as well. Summer School. I think we must have spent whole summers chasing butterflies, though we ran from the white ones, my cousins and I, afraid instinctively of everything that dressed itself in the white of Klansmen we learned about in period films played for Black History Month. Moths and cauliflower, the sticky white sap at the center of cacti split open, petting zoo sheep. When the butterflies left, we'd wet the grass and steal the worms as they fled the flood we brought down upon them. We, the gods of the universe, learning as children learn through cruelty. If you cut a worm in half, it dances like the lip of a flame and lives. Roly-poly feet feel like feathers on your fingertips. Poke and they'll curl into a ball you can flick along the table like marbles. Flick too hard and its skin parts in brittle flakes, as I imagine fish scales do, though I'm told they're made of sturdier stuff, like sequin on that fancy dress my mother hopes will go on sale someday. One summer, a red hen paw called Essie wandered into the yard to root and lay eggs. Brown orbs she loved as if they would hatch and walk around, as if no one told her it takes two to tango, and alone all she could make was a meal. Uh-oh, I lost my place. And alone all she could make. Oh no. Walk around as if no one had told her it takes two to tango, and alone all she could make was a meal. We ate the eggs, and Pa built a coop in the back corner of the yard to fill with nameless hens and a rooster, though he never brought Essie inside. Free things ought to be left that way, he said, and so Essie kept laying her failed embryos beneath the lemon tree and waiting for stubborn chicks that wouldn't come. In less than a week, Pa cleared the land and built the coop himself. He had neighbors and sons he could have asked for help, but all those years he was still a farmer chased into the city for fear, for opportunity to raise his family free and live. When the coop was still just a pile of timber and twine, he called my cousins and I to the yard to pull a rope he'd tied around a tall, skinny tree that had stood there growing all our short lives. He didn't tell us to mind the branches as it fell or that the tree would fall, though I suppose we should have known. When it did, we were 3 squealing girls scattering unharmed before the mass. Pa only laughed at us, his perfect white dentures pearling in the sun. Right. Moral of the story there, don't read from your iPad. Too easy to get lost. Let's see. I'm going to read this alternative facts poem. Alternative facts for Tamir Rice. The officer stops, parks his car at the frost-chipped curb. The officer can see the boy and spends a few more moments in the heat of his patrol car. He studies the boy, his boy-sized body and childish desire to clutch power in the untried soft of his palm. The officer remembers himself at this age, how eager he was to matter. The officer can see how the toy gun makes the boy matter. The officer can see himself in the boy. The officer can see the boy, his not yet manness, the memory of milk teeth on his smooth cheeks. The officer can see how the boy must have buried his face in his mother's flesh when the world was too much. The world-weary officer rubs his jaw and sighs. It reminds the officer of his own cherry-tinged mother, how he ought to call when he has finished sending this boy home to his own mama. The thought of his mother dimples the officer's cheeks. Ooh, we're getting down to the end. All right, I'm going to read 2 more poems, I think. On survival. Day 2 of your trip to Mississippi. Mo and Pa, Mama and you pass the morning visiting the dead where they rest in a smallish cemetery beside a Black church. To get there, you drove a rental deep into the backwoods of Meridian, where the brick and white steeple hid among the trees, a relic to the need for secrecy. It is only a year since Mother Emanuel wept with the blood of the saints. The ache of her is still fresh between your ribs. Call it superstition or chronic tenderness, but you are sure you can feel the presence of those who labored here and died long before hope became more than a sickness of the feeble-hearted. You cannot help but imagine how they must have lived. Cotton catching in the fingertips, the heat pressing, sweat cutting its path down the sinewy muscle and bone, the literal starvation and hunger for freedom. Trauma, they say, is passed down through generations, the language of it embossed in the DNA like a vine clutched around the trunk of a willow, or how a daughter learns to sing her mother's sorrow as a matter of course. And yet, if grief is in the blood, then perhaps there is also the means to survive it. You watch your grandparents, the ease of how they move among the spirits. You tune your mooring to the lilt of Mo's hum. You whisper, if they can survive, then I can too. You practice believing, you almost do. All right, this is going to be our last poem. So if you have questions and you're starting to think about them, maybe start typing them. Last poem. It's called Praise Song for the Body. To the curve in my spine, the lopsided shoulder, the vertebrae dance, praise. To the knuckle and crease of my toes, to my narrow feet and resilient soles, praise. To the ankle strain, the fat and muscle of a calf, the knees boogie beat praise. To the kink in my curls, the rub and jiggle of thick thighs, these sinful hips, yes, praise. My pale black ass, my greedy cunt and clit psalm, praise, praise to my belly-baked muffin top and snack-choked abs, praise to the sweat swamping my underboob, its damp funk, to you sweet itty-bitty titties be praise, to the bumps and hairs, to the bite-sized toffee of a nipple, praise, praise these scars, all of them, the bug bites and tumbles, the box cutters drag, praise the phoenix in the skin, its unreserved forgiveness, its sunspots and tender, praise these lips, these cheeks, this worried brow, this weight behind my eyes, praise the wheeze in my lungs, the gasp and sigh, the tongue's cry, praise to the body's inefficiencies, to the heart's frailty, to its incessant song, praise to what is frantic and divine, the me in my parts, this ragged spirit, this wandering child, praise. Thank you guys so much. And so now's your chance to ask me questions. And so if you have any, go ahead and start typing them in. And while you do, I'll just awkwardly keep time. Let's see. I don't know. It was fun reading for you all. It's very different reading, just to a screen as opposed to for a whole audience. Normally when you read in front of a group of people, you're sort of listening for the moments where they're like intensely still because they're listening, or for like the quiet little or if you're in a venue where people are more just demonstrative for their snaps and all those things. But it's kind of nice too to read here before you guys for the screen. Yeah. While I'm waiting, I can tell you all a little about my process, I guess. Let's think, which one do I want to start with? I can tell you, I'll tell you about that last poem, about Praise Song. So for Praise Song, you wouldn't guess it, but when I started writing it, I sort of was thinking in terms of the sonnet. Oh, wait, I can scroll down. There might be questions. Oh, I see your questions now. Oh, that's so nice, you guys. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. I'm going to finish my thought. So I'll show you a picture of Praise Song. It's 14 lines, and it started off because I wanted it to be, sort of like a sonnet in its way, even though it doesn't feel like a sonnet because it's so long, and as you can see, the lines are like sprawling across the page. But I needed some sort of restriction. And so I told myself it would be 14 lines, and at the end of each line would be the phrase praise, which was like a very interesting thing to work towards and sort of kept me bound in a form in a nice way. And I feel like gives the poem sort of this nice rhythm, as if praise were were like a refrain. It was not the first time, but one of the few times I've done something like that, and it felt really nice. And then what inspired the last poem I wrote? I don't know. I wrote that poem, and it was summer, and it was wonderful out, and I was sort of putting together my second book, which I'm shopping around right now, and looking at it, and I wanted that book to sort of be a journey towards joy. It sort of starts in tackling some pretty big issues, but I wanted it to sort of end in joy, and I wanted it to end in sort of a celebration. And one of the series in that poems is sort of these series of self-portraits that looks at mental health, thinking about Black women, but also, of course, thinking about specifically like my mental health and how that looks. And you can only write so many sad poems before you're just like, I want to celebrate, and I want to be able to write a poem that can celebrate me, which is something that normally feels deeply uncomfortable and difficult to do. So yeah, that's what inspired Praise Song. I'll answer my mother's question. She said, you seem to get inspiration from your family. Where else do you draw your inspiration from? I don't know. I get a lot of inspiration from like the news. My poems can be pretty reactionary. Like the things that I'm seeing out in the world. Like every now and then there are news stories that like I cannot pass by, that like if I read it, I have to write it. So like with the alternative facts poem for Tamir Rice, that's in response to his killing. Um, and then, I also sometimes poems are just purely some of it is just random. I have this one poem that starts like buoys bobbing in the harbor, and then goes on to describe like a nudist colony encounter I had. But that poem only starts like buoys bobbing in the harbor because I was sitting at the beach watching a buoy, and I was like, and I like thought that phrase. And I was like, listen to all those bees. That's such a fun phrase. I'm gonna use it in some way. So it's a lot of just random things. And then to the question, do I draft poems on that wall? I wish. This is actually, not my office. It's my girlfriend's. But I should start coming in here and putting poems on the wall. Although it would just be it would be interesting to work that way. I do normally start in my notebook. I love writing by hand. Yeah. Do I prefer to write about my own experiences or other people's experiences? Or experiences I've heard about? Definitely a mix. It's hard. It can be hard for me to write. It was very hard for me to write from my own personal experience, just because it's just so personal and it's so intimate. And so, I started with After Jubilee writing all of those persona poems as a way to sort of like distance, to be able to talk about heavy emotions without having to talk about them in terms of my own body. And then when I moved on to my second book, I sort of forced myself to start writing more personal poems. But even then I used a lot of like the second person because it was hard. It's one thing to say like, you feel sad as opposed to say, I feel sad. And so I don't know, I prefer a mix. I love persona. It's so fun. And I think there are a lot of there's so much more material to write about than other than my own life. So I do try to make sure I'm not just writing about me. But every now and then I do think it's important that, you turn inward. And I do, I wouldn't say I force myself to do that, but like every now and then it becomes inevitable. Like I have to write that poem about something happening. Let's see. Why did I start writing poetry? Because why I don't know. I started writing poetry when I was in middle school. I think I started writing poetry because emotions are hard and talking about them is even harder. But poems are good. There's this one poem I can remember writing when I was probably like 11 or 12. And it was something about like the extended metaphor was that I felt like a bear trapped in a cage, which is funny. Number one, because my girlfriend and I call this reindeer sort of like the bear outfit. And so I am a bear. I still feel like a bear on the inside. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the point of that story was, other than I've been writing poetry for a long time and it was terrible. And I hope that it has gotten less terrible as I've progressed. I don't know. There's something about it though. I feel like poetry allows for or prioritizes intimacy in a way that I think is insanely important. And it's like one of the few mediums where, like the artist is like very, I don't know, it's like the goal is to have a connection sort of like, or to like an extend a piece of humanity towards the reader or towards the audience. I don't know, like my favorite poems that I've read of other folks like feel like an encounter, like spiritually, which I appreciate. So it says your final piece feels like a call and response, a dialogue. Did you start with music in mind or a story? For that, and that's talking about Praise Song again. I didn't have music in mind. I was listening to The Dog Days Are Over. It's like the only song I know from that group, but I was listening to that on repeat, and like dancing around the studio I was in, because I was in a residency space, and sort of, yeah, I mean, I think there is like the music you're hearing and like, um, like I don't know, it was a very physical experience. There was like a lot of like dancing around and um, thinking about like all the different parts of the body and like what it means to celebrate them. Um, yeah, but in terms of a story, like not necessarily, I don't think that poem for me isn't very narrative, but it is just sort of like, um, let's just celebrate the divine and like in your body and like be comfortable about in it, with like the things that are great about it and the things that some might consider less great about it. I don't know. Um, all right, that was fun, guys. Also, hi, JR. Thank you for saying that these are wonderful poems. Um, oh, what kind of music do you listen to when you're writing or revising? It really depends. When I was writing after Jubilee, because so much of where did it go? Because so much of this book is period focused. I listened to a lot of there you go, blues music from the time period. So I listened to Son House, who's like a blues musician who was writing in like who was performing in the early 1900s. I also listened to a lot of Alan Lomax's recordings from like work songs in prisons in the South. Sometimes, I listen to gospel music. Sometimes it really like it. I like the song I pick depends on like the mood of the piece. So if it's something that's more like introspective, more thoughtful, it's normally going to be like a really mellow or really like emotional song. But then sometimes I do like have standard like work music, some classical music. One like it's called like Spiegel im Spiegel. It's worth looking up, and it's like 8 minutes of just piano and I think viola, and I'll just listen to that on a loop for forever because it helps me forget that time's passing and I can just be in the poem, and not, have any other distractions. Yeah, good questions. Very good questions. All right, I am going to wrap it up. It has been so wonderful to be here with you all. Thank you so much for listening and for asking questions and taking time out of your Super Bowl timing or saying, screw you to the Super Bowl, we don't need you, we got poems. It really, really makes me feel good. And it was just nice to do this with you all. All right, have a wonderful Sunday and bye.